Hey, good morning. I'm Patricia Murphy. It's Tuesday. This is Seattle Now. Since the beginning of the pandemic, Seattle has spent millions of dollars on hotel rooms to shelter unhoused people. One of the buildings leased by the city at a hefty cost was the Civic Hotel in South Lake Union.
Back in January 2024, city leadership decided we're going to stop putting people in these rooms, in these city beds that they were paying for.
Coming up, we'll talk with KUOW's investigative reporter Ashley Haruko about why that happened. But first, let's get you caught up. If you missed the Seattle mayoral debate between Bruce Harrell and challenger Katie Wilson last Friday, here's another chance. Wilson and Harrell will face each other again tomorrow at Seattle University. The event is sold out, but you can watch it Wednesday on the Seattle channel and Saturday on KOMO 4. The debate starts at 7 p.m., co-moderated by Seattle U and KOMO. It's not too late to register for this week's Native Hawaiian Conference in Tulalip. Washington is home to the third largest Native Hawaiian population in the country, yet this is the first time the gathering's been held here. Organizers say nearly 2,000 Native Hawaiians are expected to attend the event at the Tulalip Resort and Casino. The convention includes sessions on housing policy, education, and economic development, as well as cultural preservation. The conference starts today and runs through Thursday. And let's hope the Etsy Witch's powers work in Detroit. The Mariners face the Detroit Tigers today at 1:08 this afternoon. It's Game 3 of the American League Division Series. They're knotted up at 1 win apiece in the best-of-5 series. Game 4 will also be in Detroit tomorrow. First pitch Wednesday is 12:08. Go Mariners! Check back for more headlines on tonight's episode of Seattle Now. In the years following the COVID-19 pandemic, the city of Seattle leaned into a strategy to convert hotels into shelters to serve people who were chronically unhoused. At one point, the Civic Hotel in the South Lake Union neighborhood was full of residents who'd been given shelter. But later, many of the rooms sat empty, even though the city of Seattle was still paying the rent. KUOW investigative reporter Ashley Haruko is here now to tell us what happened. Her new story is co-published by ProPublica. Ashley, really appreciate you being here. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Always happy to chat.
So let's start with the backstory of the Civic Hotel as a shelter. Where did this start?
This goes back to the early days of the pandemic. They used this hotel to house people without homes because you could shelter people without risking the spread of the coronavirus.
Tell us about the people who the city was hoping to serve in the Civic Hotel.
The ones who would benefit most from what the Civic Hotel provided were those that were chronically homeless. Because what came along with these rooms was wraparound support services, like helping folks to access health care or apply for jobs. So although there might be a population of people who might do well at a traditional shelter, there's also this chronically homeless population that doesn't fare as well in those settings. And so when you look at the data from the co-lead program, you can see that people who were using these rooms and got into this program with wraparound services, the number of people that were placed into permanent housing exceeded the rate when compared to countywide shelters.
A group of people who are particularly vulnerable, especially during the pandemic, where we had a virus transmitting in these communities. So as you report, Seattle took over the lease at the Civic Hotel. It made sense at the time. And at one point, the rooms were packed, but it didn't last. So let's talk about what happened.
So there was a lot of variables at play when this decision was made to stop placing people there. There was a looming budget deficit. I believe at the time it was $250 million that the city was facing a deficit of. One-time federal funding was expiring, and this program that was using these hotel rooms to help people was reliant on federal funding. So that was at play when the city decided to stop placing people in these rooms. And they told Lisa Dugard, who is the co-executive director of Purpose, Dignity, Action, which is the organization, the nonprofit that oversees co-lead.
They told her the landscape's changing and we're getting out of this hotel business here at the Civic Hotel.
Exactly. They wanted a cheaper option. That's
right.
what they said. We need to find a cheaper option. And everyone seemed to be on the same page in that regard.
Did they find a cheaper option?
They did find a cheaper option. Lisa Dugard presented the city with a cheaper option, which is this North Seattle property. And, based on this email that we read, she told city officials, it'll be $1 million cheaper. We'll have access to 11 more rooms. We can get people moved by February. All we really need from you is a commitment from the city that you will support our program for the upcoming 2 to 3 years, because in order to get the savings, we would have to sign a long-term lease.
This option was presented to the city by Lisa Dugard. What happens next?
The city leaders told her no. They said, we're not going to take this option. We're not going to pursue this facility. Oh, and by the way, we want you to stop placing clients in these rooms at the Civic Hotel.
Ashley, the city's paying. How much are they paying, and how many empty rooms are they paying for?
You can look at this a number of ways. So the lease for 2024 overall was $2.7 million for all 53 rooms. We can break that down even further and say taxpayers were paying a hefty $4,200 a month per empty room. And so by December 2024, looking at these numbers, we see that there were 35 rooms of the 53 that were vacant.
Ashley, this doesn't make sense to me. Why would the city leave rooms empty when it has a chronically homeless population? Why wouldn't they fill them until the absolute last moment?
The city said that they put this pause in place to prevent people who were in these rooms from going back to the streets. And so they said they needed enough time to move people into other spots, other places like permanent housing, other shelters, etc.
So in other words, they had to start early because they may need time to move people.
Exactly.
Okay. So getting back to this cheaper option that was presented by Lisa Dugard, the city says it didn't go for it because of money, but you learned there were other things at play, Ashley. What were they?
Exactly. So last week we actually got some chat messages back, and they were exchanged. They were coming from Chief Deputy Mayor Tiffany Washington, who's a high-level official in the mayor's office. And in these messages, she's explaining why she turned down Lisa Dugard's proposal. And she says, in part, because I want her out of the homelessness business. She is not good at it.
Okay. So
it's safe to say, I think, that there were other things in play. Although the city says that's not the case. Tiffany Washington said, I've been working with Lisa Dugard for 10 years and actions speak louder than words.
What did the city tell you about why they decided not to take the second offer of shelter?
They said that they couldn't offer Lisa Dugard the needed assurances that she asked for. And they said, even though she said the move would be quick, there was work that had to be done on this other property in North Seattle. So although, yes, we were presented with this option, it just wasn't doable.
Let's talk a little bit more about how the decisions that the city made impacted the people who were trying to get off the street and into one of these hotel rooms. Did you talk with anyone?
Yes. I talked to Tiffany Fields, and she was a woman who was in the 3rd Avenue area where, some people were getting access to these city beds, and she would have been a perfect contender for one of these rooms. But instead, last year, as this pause was ongoing, she had to spend countless nights sleeping at bus stops, and that's if she could sleep. She said she tried to sleep, but every night she was so worried that she was going to be attacked or something bad was going to happen to her because that women were especially vulnerable out in the street. And so, she described to me putting her hand in her pocket and making it seem like she was holding a firearm, or like putting her hand in her purse and making it seem like she had a gun, or, feigning mental illness to try to, ward people away just because she was so worried about her safety.
Tiffany's story is not unique out on the streets. Women are far more vulnerable. That is true. And we are talking about a chronically unhoused population of people here. So beyond Tiffany's story, what is the fallout from something like this as far as you can tell?
Well, Seattle wasted taxpayers' dollars. Aside from that, I think this is an example of how we have these figureheads that are presenting like solutions and presenting these numbers that show how successful they are. In reality, decision making comes down to this one person in the mayor's office. And the ripple effect of that is people like Tiffany Fields sleeping out in bus stops. And I think it's also good to point out that this kind of shows that even though we have these efforts in place to try to help people, that behind the scenes, it's not always how it appears, that sometimes there's other things happening.
Despite all the wrangling, Ashley, they did eventually sign that second lease, that less costly option.
They did, yes. And actually, one of the among the first group of people to get in one of those rooms was Tiffany Fields. And she was so elated to be inside and not have to sleep at Seattle bus stops anymore.
Mm, yeah. Ashley Haruko is an investigative reporter for KUOW. Her story is co-published with ProPublica. You can read it right now at KUOW.org. Ashley, thanks for coming in.
Yeah, I am always happy to come in and chat.
Appreciate you listening to Seattle Now. Today's episode was produced by Andy Hurst. It was edited by Caroline Chamberlain Gomez. Our production team also includes Vaughn Jones, Brooklyn Jamerson Flowers, and Paige Browning. Greg Kramer does our theme music. Seattle Now and KUOW Public Radio are members of the NPR network. I'm Patricia Murphy. See you soon.